enough understanding in an afternoon when I teach color theory to my, classes that I teach. It's like the light bulb goes off. It's like, yeah, having this knowledge elevates your skill set and your earning power. Because when there's a problem on a job, you can fix it. You know what to do. It's taken me a long time to get to the level where I'm at, but I made that effort. I made that commitment. I mean, there was many times along the way people told me I was insane, the path that I was taking. I had a vision and I stuck to it. And I will put my outcomes against anybody's.
The answer to last episode's trivia question is 44,385,667.25 pounds. Hey guys, we'll get into the podcast in just a second. However, I'm looking for more great guests for the Blue Collar Voices show, and I've updated this older podcast with this announcement from November 2019. I am planning a road trip across America and including parts of Canada. I'll tell you more about both of these at the end of this podcast. Hello, Blue Collar Voices listeners. Today, our guest is Robert Chickey. He is a wood finisher expert. As with all my guests so far, I met him via LinkedIn. His tagline is, I solve seemingly impossible wood finishing issues. Robert, welcome to the show.
Thank you, John.
Robert, explain in a brief nutshell what it is that you do.
I solve problems for designers and architects. I basically create the process, because all color and formulas are processes, to achieve a look or a concept or a style that a designer or architect is trying to achieve. And then in turn, I share that information with their vendors who can't get there. So essentially, I create a formula and a path for others to achieve whatever look or concept their client is looking for.
Kind of like you just develop the process and you hand that off and you say, do this, this, and this, and this, and we'll get what we're after.
Exactly.
Okay. So what led to you developing this specialty of yours? How did you come upon this particular track in your career?
My story is kind of interesting. I was a painter, turned into a painting contractor. I always played in the high end of the market. And I started my company, this previous company, in 1991. I had a few employees. At that time in the 90s, at least in the upper Midwest where I was, I'm based out of Minnesota, and everything was white. The walls were white. The woodwork was white. I mean, to this day, I just hate painting white. And I got so bored with it that I almost got out of the business. I was not challenged. It wasn't creative for me. And so I looked at wood finishes. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go into wood finishes because at least it's different, and it's something that's not really utilized or tapped into. But everywhere I looked, it was always the same. It was brown and shiny. It didn't really capture the wood. I mean, the whole point to me was you weren't adding value to a product. Even when somebody takes, such effort and craft to build something extraordinary, like an extraordinary piece of furniture. The common process that was available then in the marketplace really didn't add value. All it did was hurt and protect it. That made no sense to me. I would look at antiques, furniture, woodwork from 100, 200, 300 years old, and you would look at it and you could see a richness and depth and clarity, even though it's a color. And so I figured, how did they do that? So I read and I researched and I found a path for coloring wood without stain. And over time, I developed a way to get that. A lot of the materials that were used back 200-300 years ago were toxic, and you can't safely use them. So over time, I kind of really developed ways to get color. I never used stain ever to color wood. because essentially stain hides wood. It's all pigments. And over time, I taught myself how paint is made, how stain is made, and I learned little nuances of how to manipulate coatings. And so over time, again, I created what is known as reactive color. And a reactive color is an organic way of changing the color of wood. And essentially, it's this. All wood has a basic building block in it called tannin. It's like the pigment in your skin. Some wood has a lot of it, some woods don't. And so when you use other organic materials that you mix in water, hence the safety of this stuff, and you put it on the wood, it reacts with the tannin in the wood, and it automatically shifts the color. And the color is actually part of the wood. It is now in the wood because it occurs at the cell level of the wood. So you can take a white piece of wood and put a chemical on it, and it, in water, and just watch it turn brown or red or black or blue or whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. And then you build color outward using other organic mediums. So you can have just this extraordinary depth that when people see it, they're just absolutely blown away by it because it's not something they're used to seeing. Most people see color the traditional method because that's all they know. That's all they've ever been exposed to. So you can't really, one of the biggest issues I have is getting it exposed. People see it and they're like, oh my God, what did you do here? It's like, it's just a different approach. Today, everything is available at the paint store. That's it.
I would have never thought that there was anything besides a stain or a paint. What you're talking about is a totally new concept to me.
It is for a lot of people, but it's something that I've been doing for, I started doing this probably in 1995. So what is that? 30 years or 20 plus years I've been playing with reactive color and I've honed my knowledge. There's not a color I can't make, period.
It sounds like you could take, with what you're talking about, just a cheap piece of pine and make it look really stellar.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because people, again, the knowledge that's out there is been taught by coatings companies who tell you have to use X to get your finish, to get your look. If you go back and look at the industry standards, like in the commercial world, there's the AWI, the American Woodwork Institute, I think is what it's called, sets a standard of how you should color wood, the process. That information was provided by coatings companies. They tell you have to use our products, and this is the path for which you can achieve whatever you're trying to do. So even no matter what your skill set is, if you're a very basic beginner using stain, or if you're a seasoned elite creative professional using dyes and toners and shaders and all kinds of fantastic products that they produce, you will have a certain look. But there are thousands of other ways to do it that have a completely different outcome. And that outcome for me, the most important thing for me is to see the wood. I never understood the path of why using stain made any sense. You color the wood, period. So when you take a piece of softwood like pine and put stain on it, it turns it a color, but it's muddy. It's muddy. You don't see the wood. That makes no sense. And I look at it differently than other people. But when you show someone what is actually possible, that you can actually take a piece of wood, any wood, no matter what, even scrub pine, and give it a color and have total clarity, the concept is something that they can't even wrap their brain around. It's possible.
I'm very interested to see examples of this. And I know that you probably have pictures of a before and an after.
I do. I have a lot of stuff on my Instagram page because that's where I do a lot of posting. I'll show you one of the things that I've done recently is a concept that most people really struggle with trying to understand. And today, one of the trendy things is a black color. And it's possible to get black with stain or dye. Some people use India ink. There's all kinds of ways to get it. But the problem is when you have black, it's opaque. You lose the wood. You can see the texture of the wood still. If it's oak or walnut or even pine. Pine doesn't really have texture, but you can see the early wood and the late wood of the pine, and they raise up a little bit when you put a coating on it. But with my approach, with reactive color, you actually can have black and it's translucent. That's an oxymoron to most people. It's like, how can you have a black color and see through it to the wood?
Right.
That doesn't make sense on any plane.
No, I'm just trying to imagine that, and I'm very, very curious to see.
I've done it, and I do it. And so there was a few companies on Instagram that said, I have X. There's a guy, the company in Ohio had some red oak tables, and they said their client wanted it black, and he told me the products he was going to use, and I said, yeah, it'll get you black, but you're not going to see anything. You might as well paint it. To me, I understand that most people don't play in the world that I play in.
Right.
And so it's, again, exposure to what is possible. When you imagine today, in today's environment, most people don't make anymore. Most people go to the paint store or their coating store and say, match this for me. And the coating store is inundated by this enormous amount of people who are coming in and saying, make this. They don't have time to get you to perfection. They get you in the ballpark and then say, here it is. Even guys that are really, really skilled at the paint store, and there are a few of them, get you close. I don't deal in close. I deal in perfect. You want this color? That's the color I make for you. But my color, you see right through it.
This is very intriguing.
A lot of times when I was a painting contractor, we worked around the country, and I was in my heyday. I had 12 employees, and I was very well known for, in the small circle that I worked in, of being able to create whatever color you want. A lot of times I kind of cut my teeth on this reactive color and learning about historically accurate finishes, because a lot of the materials that I used were materials that were used back 200-300 years ago. And the reason they fell out of favor is because they're not production oriented. That's why a lot of fantastic materials that are not known today are not in the marketplace, because they don't dry fast. You can't put 15 coats on it a day. Everything today is geared toward, it has to come out of a spray gun. It has to get done quick, and that's the production mentality, but you lose so much. When you imagine from, say, 1920 to maybe 1990, the coating of choice in this world was nitrocellulose lacquer in the commercial space, and sometimes in the residential space, for a clear finish. A sprayable product, a product that you could easily fix, because it's, when you put another layer on it, burns back in. So it's fixable. But then the coating company said to you, well, we got this better product. It's called pre-catalyzed lacquer. It's a little hardier, because now we take the lacquer and we add a catalyst to it to make it a harder film. And you can sort of fix it, but it's harder, so it's better. It's like, why is it better? People don't ask those questions. And then they came out with called a post-catalyzed lacquer. You can't fix it. It's super hard. It's bulletproof. You shouldn't have to fix it. Well, people are hard on things. So to fix something, to me, that means you use the same product to fix it. Once this stuff cures, you cannot fix it. You have to use a different product to fix it. And so that has actually created a whole new industry for people that go around fixing these finishes. And how insane is that? Because they are production-based, period. But the art and the craft is lost because it's all about what the coatings companies produce. You know?
All that being said, what makes your methods better?
I don't necessarily say that it's better or worse. You know, when I was a contractor, I would get frustrated with why don't people see why my side is better? And now, you know, having had the life path that I've had, and I'll get into that in a minute, but I mean, now I just want people to be aware that there's options. You know, every coating has components in it that make it viable for whatever application they're trying to do. Because, I mean, a coating is 3 basic things, and then all the other things they put in it. So a coating is essentially a solvent, a binder, and a pigment. And then a clear, it's a solvent, a binder, and a dryer. So once you understand that, there's a lot of things you can do with coatings. Things that people tell you can't. I'm like, no, you can't, but I can. And so when you have those kind of parameters, what people don't realize, all the other things that go into a coating, you know, the chemistry that is put in there is all about production. And I just happen to think it's, for me, doesn't add value. You know, when you walk into a residence and they're spraying catalyzed lacquer and you have to be in a full body suit to work in that environment, how is that safe? And literally the stuff smells that bad that no one else can be in the house. That's insanity to me. And I just want people to realize you have choices. Everything at the paint store is not everything that's out there. It's just what you've been exposed to. You know, I use products that don't smell. I mean,
you can smell them.
Yes, you can smell them, but there are actually organic coatings, organic materials that come out of this earth that are better than those products, but they don't dry in 5 minutes. You know, they have fantastic visual optical qualities. They can be repaired. They're super durable. I mean, how durable does it have to be? You know, when you realize, I've been involved in projects where there's been catalyzed coatings on a project. I did a project a few years ago. I'll give this a funny story. And I was brought in to try and solve an issue for an architect. And there was 50 doors in this house. And they were bird's eye maple, special veneers that were brought in. And the painting contractor did something along the process, and it didn't matter why, but the moisture got underneath the film, and they were starting to turn the doors cloudy. And I looked at them, and I said that, okay, the only way you can fix this is to release the moisture under the film. Now, if this was a pre-catalyzed lacquer, I'd have an option. But since it's post-catalyzed, the only way to get the moisture out is to get the film off.
Is it like an impermeable layer? Or quasi?
Yes. I mean, it's like an automotive finish in your house.
Okay.
You cannot. So the only way to strip it off, most strippers won't even strip it off. You actually have to cut through the film. I mean, you got to remember the film is maybe, 2 millimeters or 3 millimeters thick. So you got to cut through it without damaging the veneer underneath. So that's a serious skill set there. And then the stripper gets underneath to get it off. I mean, ultimately, I just said, the cost to get it off was almost more than to rebuild the doors. Well, they ended up buying 50 new doors. The doors were $1,000 a door. 50 grand.
That's expensive.
Because of the choice of the material that was made. Plus, I just said, I wish I'd have known about this project. I wish you'd have known about me before, because your outcome with this would have blown your mind what was actually possible. I'm not saying my way is better. It's just different. And it's about how you evaluate for you the look, because that's what's important here. Choice. Yeah, as I said, I used to say my way is better, but you can't say that. People have to have a choice, but you have to inform them, educate them about this is what you know, even at the highest end. If you're the most creative person using finite set of materials, you're going to have finite results. I understand the very basic to the highest end you can play with conventional coatings. I can go and do that. That makes my knowledge valuable. But then I also have this other side, the side that I created. People look at me like I'm from bars when I tell them what's possible. They're like, that's not my reality. I'll say, that. I'm just here to show you that you can go here and get this. And I'm making it. Today, there's really nothing at a paint store I buy off the shelf. My brushes, sundry items, but there's fantastic products that do come out of a can from small companies around the world that understand that you can have extraordinary, but they don't have huge budgets to promote their products than, the big guys that are out there. People don't ask the right questions. I think they want easy. They're like, I want X. Okay. Well, it must be available at my paint store, even though I don't even understand what's in it, because they think that way. And so when there's a problem, they're lost. And it's a huge problem in our industry today that many contractors are great applicators, because there's definitely a skill set in learning how to put it on. But when you have a problem along the way, and you do the same thing over and over and over and expect a different result, well, that's kind of insane. It is. And so,
true.
If you just really understood that these coatings change constantly because they have to, because the regulations say you have to, but they don't tell people they're changing them. I mean, I always knew right away when a coating changed. I could see it, feel it. I got it, and I would call them up and say, hey, you changed this. And they'd be like, we didn't do that. I'm like, okay, fine. And I would just go elsewhere until I just got to the point where I would make my own. But I understand that's a way different level of knowledge.
Right.
But people need to understand that they have options. You don't have to use stain. But that's all you know. Let me just ask you this. On what other industry is the word stain have a positive connotation? Really? Name one.
I would say that typically it's a stain is a problem.
Yes, exactly. So, anyway, when I was a painting contractor, as I said, I had 12 employees, and we did projects that were many, many months. I mean, we were really not production oriented. I was really, when I started my company and when I shifted to my path that I'm in now, the craft and the art of painting was important to me. We basically did everything by hand. I mean, we had the capability of spraying, but I just wouldn't do it in somebody's house. And I would teach my staff this, like, you can brush a coating and make it look sprayed. It's a skill set. I'm going to teach you how to do it. And we're doing it my way. And that's what we did. But, I just kind of had a life event in 2010. I had a freak accident and broke my leg at my house. Just a weird thing. I went home to cut my grass because that's what I did. It was mindless to take my head out of gear.
Right.
And I got between my dog, which was a big 8-pound lab, and a rabbit. And in his full charge, he hit my leg and flipped me up in the air. And when I came down, I drove my kneecap into my tibia and split it like a log. Down.
Ouch.
Down, not across. And I didn't go back to work for 11 months. And life just took a hard right turn. So, I tried to keep my company going, but it was just, 11 months without, I didn't walk in my office for 11 months. And when I did, I walked in on crutches. So, it just came apart. So I was really, the next few years were challenging to say the least. I was definitely lost. And, when you go that path, I couldn't really go work for another painting company because everything they did really went against what I was about. So I tried working for other organizations, but it just amazed me as how many people really didn't care. Average was okay. People accept this. And it's like, again, when you play at the high level that I played at, it was heartbreaking for me. It was soul sucking, actually. And in 2016, I just said I'd had enough. I have to find a path for me to play at the level I'm capable of. And so I thought, what makes sense here for me is when I was a contractor, why did people come to me? And they came to me because of what I was able to produce. But the cost involved was always a barrier because of the way we did it. So I knew that, when clients hired me, I was usually 2.5 to 3 times what was already on that job, which is a huge bite for somebody. So I said, if I created the path for someone to achieve my finish, my approach, without the labor, and in an easier way, they could be successful. And so that's what I did. And so I don't have employees right now, but as I scale up, I'll eventually get them again. But it's just a different way now. Now I travel around the country and I work. In the last year, I've traveled so many places. It's not funny, but it's exciting to go and teach somebody a different way because it opens up their world. When you tell them you can make X in water, they look at you like you're speaking Russian to them until you show them. And then you're just like, holy cow.
And touching on that, you're talking about the organic materials. What are like some of those organic materials? Help me understand. I can envision it could be like ground up rock or something.
Right. A common path that people talk about is a product called iron acetate. And it's just basically a really pretty much well-known one is you take white vinegar and steel wool or steel or something like that, and you stick it in the vinegar. And it creates there's a chemical reaction that happens. And the acetic acid, the vinegar, pulls the iron particles off the steel, and it creates this liquid, iron acetate. And so when you put it on woods that have high tannin, like oak, it turns it black. Instantly it turns it black. You brush it on, and it's black in a millisecond, and it's clear. That's a pretty well-known one, but there's lots of things. There's different seeds. There's tree bark. There's salts, mineral salts from different parts of the world. And literally, you can take when you finish wood a conventional way. Most people say, okay, like I have a piece of alder. alder reacts this way when I put stain on it. It guides your path. And I'm like, wrong. That wood is a blank canvas. I direct its path. You can pre-treat it with tannic acid. You could put more tannic acid in it. And tannic acid comes from a variety of sources. It comes from the tannin of a hide from an animal. It comes from oak gall trees. It comes from acorns. I mean, you get it. It's an organic product. They dry it out. It's in a powder form. You mix it in water at various ratios. Put it on the wood.
Does the tannin from a tree react differently than tannin from an animal hide?
Not really, because you could mix it in ratios. Once they synthesize it down, it's a basic building block.
Okay.
And then you put it on the wood in water. Again, I mean, there's no smell. It's a little bit of a smell, but it's nothing like conventional coatings. There is definitely a learning curve here, and it's a big one because there are rules you have to follow when you play with a reactive finish. You can't just slop it on because the minute it hits the wood, it colors the wood. So you really have to understand that. And then it's possible to go backwards with a coating. People tell you that's impossible. It's like, well, again, it's not. By altering the pH of a coating, by altering the pH of a species of wood, you can make it do things. It's mind-blowing what's possible. I mean, you can actually take shellac. Most people, I don't know, even realize what shellac is?
I really don't. I've used it, but I don't know what it is.
Okay, it's an organic product. It comes from a bug. It's an excretion of this lac beetle during the birthing process of its young. That's where it comes from. But to make shellac, it's liquefied in denatured alcohol. But denatured alcohol smells. It is actually possible to mix shellac with water. I can take water and change the pH of the water by putting an additive in that water. And that will allow me to take that shellac flake and liquefy it. No smell.
Everything that you're describing here almost makes me think of an alchemist, but it is absolutely a higher, much more in-depth process of treating wood, because this is, like you mentioned, it's way past just going to the store and buying something of a particular color and applying it. This is a multi-step process with everything that you're doing.
Yes, it is. It's not quick. I'm not going to say it is, but even, again, I've always played at the high end of the market, and I like teaching people that don't play in the high end of the market. You have options. You don't have to use stain. You can use dye. Just dye. Dye is a translucent medium. You can go to, probably not a paint store, but you can go to a hardware store, a specialty hardware store. You can get dye online, and that's, get one that has no binder in it that makes it miscible in both water and alcohol. You can get whatever color you want and see right through it. Most people don't even know that's possible because the information they get is everything, all your answers come out of a can at the paint store. That's the way it's taught. All the media, all the TV shows are all like, all your answers are stain or polyurethane, which I absolutely hate. I think it's the most heinous stuff on the world. But we won't go there. But again, what's at the store is a nick on what is actually possible.
How much of this that you're doing has been self-taught versus, like I see on your LinkedIn profile, you studied finishing from the 17th through the 20th centuries. How much of it was perhaps a rediscovery process to research and perhaps rediscover how they did things versus things that you've just created yourself?
Most of it's been a rediscovery. I mean, when I was first starting, in the mid 90s, I was going back and researching treatises from the 16th, 17th century and looking at what did they use. And then I went into the 18th century and 19th century, which is more indicative of what I was playing with in the northern, in Minnesota. I'll tell you, though, it's kind of interesting. Along the way, I started a project in 2000, I think it was 2000 or 2001, where a client they were obviously a wealthy client, but they were going to go to a castle in France and buy some rooms, take them apart and bring them back and put them in their house. But the contractor talked them out and just said, there's so much reconfiguring that this doesn't make any sense. And a friend of one of her friends said, go talk to Robert. He's different. So I was invited to come by and talk to this client. I'm the architect and I'm the builder. And I was telling them what I could do. And they looked at me like I was, a Martian. And then I made a sample for them and they were like, wow. And they could see what I did, but they didn't grasp it at all. And I was still relatively early in my career. And I'd only been doing this for like 5 years at that point. And I mean, compared to what I know now, I was an infant. But they were like, so the client had this really extensive antiques collection. And they said, I'm going to have my conservator talk to this guy before we sign him. So they flew in their antiques conservator, who's one of my friends today. And we had a nice conversation and he was like, so tell me what you do. And I told him what I do. And he was like, oh my God, man, that's what I do with antiques. I'm like, really? Yeah, well, that's what I put in people's houses. And so that was my approach. That's where I learned my knowledge, was going back and looking at how they would restore antiques, because that's my path. I want my wood to look like that. Mm-hmm. So I figured out how to do that. But over time, through him, I met actually a bunch of people that play in that field that are conservators. I met this one gentleman named Don Williams, who makes me look stupid. And I don't consider myself stupid. But he, at the time I met him, was the senior conservator for the Smithsonian for furniture and wooden objects. Brilliant man. I learned a ton from him. And so I studied with him about transparent and polychrome coatings. And I learned a lot. And it just further enabled me to manipulate coatings to do what I wanted to do instead of what people tell you what's possible. It's like, this wood will only do X. And I know better that that's your experience. That's all you know. And I appreciate that. But I know different. I know I can take whatever wood it is and do what I want it to do. And it's viable. It's scientific. It's good science. It's just different knowledge. It's a different approach. And so now that's what I do. I teach people, and I want people to understand you have options.
So how do you combine this together with protection? Like if you're coloring the wood, but you also want the wood to be protected, how do those two go hand in hand?
So my path now, as I travel around the country, is I can make the color with reactive color because it's in water. It's a chemical reaction in the cell level. So you can put whatever you want on top, technically.
As long as it's not polyurethane.
You can even use that if you so choose to, but, because I have the knowledge I have as a painting contractor, I know virtually every conventional man-made coating system that exists on the market. So I can work in all those mediums. But as I said to my clients, it's like, even if I use the exact same materials that you did, but in a different order and in a different way, and maybe added a couple layers in, I will have a profoundly different outcome than you do. And so I teach them my approach, which is different. But my outcomes, they're not comparable to what's out there. And I had a project recently for a commercial firm that I'd been chasing a couple times to just tell them, I'm like, look, my path is so much easier if you just let me do this on the front end of your project. Come in here and make your process for your vendors. And it's hard for them to do it because you're kind of disrupting the business model. And so that's been one of the challenges. But I got a call from them. They were 8 months into a project. 8 months. There was 4 different vendors involved trying to get this one color. And none of them could do it. Not one. I mean, the samples were I was shocked how bad they were. But in that world, people accept. They just they're like throw up their hands after a while and say, okay, this is the best we can do. This is my favorite line is, this is our best possible outcome, or, we're pretty close in the ballpark. I mean, those are just terrible things. You should never have to say that to a client. Anyway, so they're like, we need your help here. And I said, I'm on a plane in 3 days. I'm heading out to the East Coast for 12 days. I got a big business trip, pleasure trip planned. And, I was kind of irritated with them. I said, what part of this conversation did you not get? You're 8 months into this project. How many thousands of dollars have you burned through? And what have you gotten for that huge investment? Nothing. So anyway, the moral of the story is I said I would make the color when I got back. I got back on a Sunday. I said I'll have the color for you on Wednesday morning. I delivered that color on Wednesday morning. It was approved because it was perfect. Not close, not in the ballpark. Perfect. And how long did it take me? 1 day. 1 day. They spent it.
Plus years of experience.
Yeah, plus years of experience. I'm not going to say that that's not important, but it's because I take a different approach and I use the same materials that they did. But I got the color.
So what is it that you did different? You said you used the same materials.
And so every one of them used stain on the wood first. And you cannot do that. The whole mentality is a production mentality. And so when you take stain and you put it on the wood, because the pigments that are used in stain today they're just not good quality. You could take stain and put it on and let it sit till it dries and wipe it off. And it's only going to get so dark. And so then they put another one on. Or they put a toner on. But they might make a toner out of stain or have pigments in it. It hides the wood. And so when you're trying to get a color, sometimes the best approach is to build it in layers. When you take the wood and you put a wash coat down first. These are just technical aspects of how to get a color. You put a wash coat down, and you can make a wash coat in a myriad of ways, but in this particular way, I just make one because it's cheaper to make one than to buy one off the shelf. Because most coatings are mostly solvent, And once you understand that a gallon of stain is probably 75 or 80% solvent, pigment, and binder are the small components. You can make it cheaper and have far better control than what comes out of that can. And so I made a wash coat.
And as you're stepping along this, what is a wash coat?
I was just explaining. So a wash coat is a very thin layer that stops the stain from fully penetrating. So it gives you the color, but it takes the blotchiness out. So when you put the wash coat down, in this instance, it was 90% acetone, which is a hot solvent, and a hot solvent hits the wood and it's dry. It gases off. But it's the carrier for the binder. The binder, in this instance, was a catalyzed coating that they were going to be doing in a closed facility. So the wash coat is 90% acetone and 10% catalyzed coating. That's your binder. And you spray that on, and the only thing that sits on there is the 10% of binder. But it's not a complete film. It's just a thin layer. Then you put the stain on, and the stain colors the wood, but it's not muddy because it can't fully penetrate. The pigment can't fully penetrate into the pores. But it's not dark enough now. So now you have to do a toner. And a toner is another high-level skill, whereas actually you're taking the same kind of process as a wash coat. It's still, again, mostly solvent, but this time there's pigment or some kind of coloring agent added to the binder mix. And you're putting on thin layers of color. But again, it's mostly solvent. So the minute it hits, it's dry. But it shifts the color. You're adding depth. So you have this clarity, and you get the multiple colors that a sample provides by building it in layers. It's actually faster than stain, because stain takes time to dry. And so in this instance, this was a production type mentality with my approach. And so literally I made that color in a day. And then the look they wanted was almost a dead flat. And in a commercial environment, the best product that was available at the paint store was a 5-degree sheen. 5-degree sheen means when you look at a coating, sheen levels are dead flat, which is technically 0, or full gloss, which is 100. So 0 to 100 degrees. 5-degree sheen is plus or minus 5%. So even though they say 5 degrees, when you look at it from an angle, it still looks like there's a sheen there. And that was not
just ever so slightly.
Just ever so slightly. But it was enough that it was going to throw off this look. But because I researched so much, I know of a coating that's from Europe that had less than 4%. And when you manipulate it in a way, it was almost like 2%. Well, you can't really even perceive it 4%, the 4 degree, but so I specified this coating that wasn't available. I knew where to get it. I had it shipped in. I put it on that door. And they were perfect. And it's just that level that I play at, where you can design every layer to get X. It's possible, because I do it every day.
Definitely a high level of skill and approach. How is this applicable to say flooring and the longevity and the need to withstand, foot traffic? How would you use this, say, in a flooring capacity?
So again, it's a coating. it doesn't matter what the substrate is. I mean, it really doesn't for me, because I was actually this week working on a project where I had to take existing bricks in a residence that were pink and like a golden color, and the client wanted them to be gray, and I used a reactive color and chemically shifted that brick to go the direction I wanted.
It's not even wood. You're working in an entirely different medium.
Absolutely. But because it's chemistry. And I don't have a degree in polymer science, or I never even finished college. It's just a different way of thinking. You can actually shift no matter what it is. If it's actually an organic living thing, because brick comes out of the earth too. It's just fired. But you can do stone, you can do concrete. I mean, you can shift a color of something organically. It is possible. But let's talk about flooring. So one of the ways that it's possible to do with flooring, when I play with an organic product, and I don't want to mention here because I don't know that that's okay, but
well, you can mention anything you want from my perspective.
Okay, so I play with this one coating. It's called Odie's oil, and it's a hard oil. It's a kind of a new classification of coatings. Most of the best coatings, the most innovative coatings today are in Europe by far. American coatings are so far behind. They have the technology. It's just that, frankly, I think Americans don't ask questions. They just want to drink the Kool-Aid that people tell you. So there's no incentive for coatings companies to get you to switch to this technology. That's going to happen. It's just happening slower in the United States. So in Europe, floors are not coated with polyurethane. They don't do that. They oil their floors. And some of the big players in the market, there's 3 big players out there in this hard oil. The 3 biggest players are Rubio Monocoat, Osmo, and Lobo-Waco. They're all European coatings, European companies. And they sell their coatings as safe, VOC-free, organic, things like that. But in reality, they have fantastic colors. The colors are so much different than what's available in a can at the store. So people see those colors and they're like, wow, I only have to use 1 coat. That's it. You put a coat on, you're done. If you do polyurethane, you're 3, 4, 5 coats to get protection. Again, people don't ask questions. And that's, if they did, and if they understood what they were reading, they would have a much different outcome. Rubio Monocoat has some fantastic colors, but it tells you that A, it's a molecular bond. You only have to put 1 coat on. It's a molecular bond. But if you understand what you're reading, and you really look for their MSDS sheet, which is something that all coatings anywhere in the world have to have, and that's a material safety data sheet where it says what's in it. If you look at it, it says that it has petroleum distillates. That's mineral spirits. That's not organic. That's not natural. Plus, there's a kit. You put the coating on, and this part 2. The part 2 is isocyanate. Isocyanates are nothing but chemicals. It is a building block for polyurethane. It allows their oil to dry. If you don't put it in there, it won't dry. So you can put it on your floor and 30 days later, it's not really dry. That doesn't work for them. And that is a toxic chemical. But again, they tell you that it's a natural, safe, no VOC product. And it's a no VOC product because our government has a threshold for what is a VOC. That's a whole different discussion. But Odie's oil is made in the United States. It is 100% organic. There is no solvents in it. And it was originally designed for floors. It doesn't really have premixed colors. It has pigments that you can mix. And so that's kind of a drawback for a lot of people. And that I've been kind of teaching people how to make colors with pigments because that's the skills that I have. Anyway, when you put Odie's oil on and you allow it to cure for 2 weeks, I mean, I have literally used it outside and left it outside, and water does nothing to it. I mean, I've poured, the first time I ever used it, I had it on for 12 hours on a board. I didn't even know what I was doing. 12 hours, one layer. I stuck it out of the hood of my truck. It rained for 2.5 days. A conventional coating with 12 hours of dry time would be white when you go get it.
Would be white?
White, be cloudy, because the moisture would get underneath it. I went out after 2.5 days to go to work on Monday morning, and it was fine. It had beaded up. That's it. I was blown away. I couldn't even believe it was possible. So that is a super great coating, and it's 100% organic, and it smells like oranges. And so you can have what other color you want. You can just manipulate your process, adjust your process to get the color you want and use the coating system you want. It is possible to do what I do underneath polyurethane. I just hate the stuff because it's liquid plastic. When you use organic resins, the difference in clarity and colors that you see will blow your mind. Because when all you know is an American-made or European-made or whoever made your coating coming from a can, that is all chemistry. They don't use organic resins because they're expensive and because they don't dry fast. But when you see what's possible, it is life-changing for some people. I mean, I have actually had clients cry coming into houses that we worked on because they are so overwhelmed by the difference. And it's happened more than once. They're physically moved by it.
So what's the maintenance of this compared to a more conventional product?
It's not it's the same. I mean, I've got stuff that I did 20 years ago that I haven't touched. That hasn't been touched. It's a process. It's using certain materials that are hard. They just don't dry fast. That's the only difference here.
Right.
They're not production friendly. I mean, understand that is how coatings are designed today. It's all about fast. And people do all kinds of crazy things to try and do layers, like putting color in a varnish is a horrible idea. People do it all the time. But you're breaking down a building block by putting stain in, I don't even get me started. I'm sorry. I mean, it's just, there's science to coatings and there's methods to coatings that make sense to have a chemically viable coating and to have the color you want. But it takes time. It is a different approach. It's not fast. That's the way it is.
So with what you're doing here, you're traveling all around the country. You're involved in all kinds of different projects. What is just a really amazing project that you undertook that stands out?
I'm involved in projects that I'm usually only there a few days because a lot of it is the process to get you there. I mean, the project I did, it was actually one in Minnesota. It was not last year, it was the year before, that I was really proud of. And that was the one that had the 5 different wood species in it.
The wall?
Yeah, but there was a whole lower level of this house. And I came in at the end of the project, which is not really the most economical way to get me involved. But because I have this other knowledge, this knowledge of conventional coatings, I can go in and see what they did. They'd made through a series of events, through the contractor and the homeowner and the designer, trying to get where they wanted to go, but with a contractor who didn't have that knowledge to get there, a series of bad decisions were made. And by the time I got involved, the client was upset. They'd been in this project for a year and a half. A lot of money was spent in this house, over $1 million. Mm-hmm. I'm not just in coatings, but in the project. And, when you have to go to your client and say, this is our best possible outcome, that's not a conversation you want to have at that level. And so I knew the builder, he reached out to me. And I don't really work with a lot of builders because, frankly, I don't think a lot of builders really care. Not at this. That's been my experience. They just want you to fit inside their schedule. I know him personally. He just said, I need your help. Can you help me here? And so I went in and I looked at where they wanted to go and where they were. And, they had a really tight timeline. And I asked the painting contractor, walk me through what you did. And I said, okay, so we have to take this off because in his path, he made some bad mistakes. And his information came from the kids at the paint store, who, again, only know what the knowledge they comes from a coatings company, which is biased. People need to understand that, and they don't. So I said, okay, we have to take this off, and we have to take it off in this method, or we're going to have problems. And I walk them through why, because it's important for people to learn from these mistakes so they don't do it again, because that knowledge is not out there. And then I said, okay, this is the path we're going to take. Nothing we're going to use is coming out of a can. The top coats were coming out of a can, but they didn't come from the paint store. I actually shipped them in because I wanted a different look. Most people buy coatings based on price. That mentality gets people in trouble. I buy coatings based on performance and the look I want. Because in the scheme of things, materials are 10% of your cost, max. So I'm willing to spend another 0.5% of a job cost to get the look I want and the performance that I want. I'm not going to compromise something that's only 10% of a project. That makes no sense, but it's a mentality that I'm trying to change. People need to be educated. So we went backwards and then we went forward. And in the course of that project, there ended up being 5 different species in this basement, in this lower level. But with my method, you can adjust a process in the front end and slightly shift that color. So, because again, they would have put the same color across all those species and every one of them differently. And that's not acceptable in my world. I want one color, and it is possible. So there was mahogany, which turns red. It has a red cast. So, but you just adjust. It doesn't take that long. Literally, I spent an extra 3 hours and then had an even color. 3 hours. That's all by adjusting. But granted, that's my knowledge, but it's just a mindset of saying, the conventional method is, well, this is what wood allows me to do. And I'm like, that's just not true. That's the way you perceive. I know differently.
So you have a significant knowledge of wood as well, just to go along with the chemical side of things.
Yes, I do. I have a pretty broad sense of what wood is, what species are, how they react, because I've taken the time to learn that. That's important to me. I look at substrates as, for me, that the process of being creative it's like art to me. These are blank canvases for me to create. You tell me what you want, and I create the path for you to get there. and then I go on to the next. But what's important to me is to teach this knowledge so that the path doesn't die with me. And it's not like I'm creating the wheel. It exists. It's just lost because it's not production friendly. But you can take that knowledge and manipulate it in a way to fit inside a production environment. It is possible. It's just tweaking the method.
So thinking about, go ahead, I'm sorry.
One of the things that I'm thinking of doing this year is bringing apprentices along with me as I travel so that they see and they're exposed to all these different mediums. And so my hope is this, is that I took the knowledge that I absorbed and went this path, my path. But if you take the knowledge that you learned from me, maybe in your world, you can manipulate it to go a different direction and perpetuate something else and grow someone else. I think it's important to educate people, to get people interested in working with their hands, using your mind and your hands to create. It is so satisfying to walk in to just raw and create what I get to create. It drives me.
Right. I can understand that. I really do. So if somebody was interested in this, is this whole ecosphere of what you're doing and what you're talking about, is it a good career choice rather than just trying to not lose touch of the old ways? Is this something that people could use to actually grow a successful career?
Absolutely. I mean, when I show people what's possible, it blows them away. And you can take it. I mean, you don't have to go strictly the organic path. I don't always play in the organic path because clients don't always have that. It's really about an approach of getting color through layers. It's just a different knowledge base. You can work inside a production environment. It's just that it's not conducive because it needs to take time to develop. But yes, when you show people this knowledge and they take it to their clients are like, oh my God, I didn't even know this existed. Just like you. I'm teaching you something today that's probably blowing your mind. But when you can take it and put it in practice in a business, you're rare. It's a career grower. There's no doubt about it. And you can take the approach, because that's really what it is. It's an approach. And you can use it in different mediums. I think, the whole craft thing, the whole trade situation in our country is in trouble.
I absolutely agree.
And we really need apprentice system in this country. And today's high school kids who are our next generation are told that college is your only path. And that's just crap, because most kids that go to college pick careers that are not going to give them the kind of return on their investment that you're going to make in a trade. It's not even close. I mean, you realize what a skilled tradesman can earn in his or her lifetime. You're coming out of college with debt, and usually a pretty significant debt that might take you 15, 20 years to pay off. So you're not actually making good money until you're deep into your career. I mean, 10 or 15 years in a skilled craftsman who has that mentality can make some significant money. Is it the same as sitting at a desk? No, it's not.
Thank God.
I can't sit at a desk. That's just not, my brain works way too fast for that. I really think that needs to change. It really does. And I really believe that lack of training is one of the reasons that people are in the place they're in. and why I right now am so in demand, because people are lost. The skill set to get to a solution is not there. It's just applicators. They are applicators. They don't even understand color. And when you're a contractor and a painting contractor and you can't grasp color theory, you're lost. And that's a basic thing. And that's something that should be taught and could be taught in an afternoon. Enough understanding in an afternoon. When I teach color theory to my, classes that I teach, it's like the light bulb goes off. It's like, yeah, having this knowledge elevates your skill set and your earning power. Because when there's a problem on a job, you can fix it. You know what to do. It's taken me a long time to get to the level where I'm at, but I made that effort. I made that commitment. I mean, there was many times along the way people told me I was insane, the path that I was taking. I had a vision and I stuck to it. And I will put my outcomes against anybody's. And you can actually take, and I've done this many times, an existing finish, let's say it's 50 years old. It has a patina to it.
Right.
And take brand new wood that's right next to that 50-year-old finish. And I can create a process that where you will not be able to tell the difference. I guarantee it. Whereas today, you would get the architect would just say, we have to create a new narrative here because you can't possibly make that new woodwork look like this. And it's like, no, you can't, because those solutions are not at a paint store. But there are materials on this planet that can be utilized in a certain order, in a certain approach, where you cannot tell the difference between the 50-year-old and the 2-minute-old, and extrapolate that to something that's 200 years old. It's just a different thought process.
Well, thinking about fine furniture and how you could restore things and make them look like there was never a problem.
Absolutely. I know people that play in that world. There's really skilled conservators out there, or even guys that work with new furniture, where, that's one thing that I've garnered over the multiple decades I've been in this business. As I've traveled around the country, I've learned who the serious technicians and really gifted people are around the country. I don't know them all, that's for sure, but I know a lot of them. And so when I travel to a state and somebody needs X and they don't know where to get it, it's a phone call. I know this person and they can do X. And, if they're not close, fly them in or teach you or whatever. It's, again, a different approach, and it's about education. And so being on your show was something I jumped at because I want people to understand you have options. And it's not the only options that you see in the print magazines or on TV, on HDTV, or what's being taught at your local trade show. That is what people want you to believe, that these are your only options. And that's just not at all true.
What kind of documentation process have you done for all of this?
I have a lot of, I'll tell you, it's interesting. I mean, I've had a lot of people, especially in the last couple of years, tell me you need to write a book. And I thought, I know, what I know is different, but I don't know that it'd be enough that people would want to buy a book. But, I have a lot of things that I've written, formulas that I've written and kept. So I have that kind of documentation. But my portfolio is projects around the country that I've been involved in.
Well, the concern that you expressed is this knowledge, passing it on, not having this knowledge lost. Outside of perhaps writing a, quote, book, this could simply be something that you create that's a PDF of everything, and it could be something that is just freely shared.
Yeah, and that's one thing too. But I can show you all the material. I could take every material I use on a process and stick it in front of you. But that's not going to give you the guide to what to do, because it's all about ratios, and it's about an approach. And the approach needs to be adjusted for different species of wood and for different mediums. And it's taken me, literally decades to figure this out. So I can give you a baseline path, an approach, and how to do layers. And that's what I teach. But it's going to take time to experiment and learn. When you play with mediums that don't really exist in the common world, I've had things go horribly wrong and had to figure out how to make it right. So, I've seen pretty much everything that could go wrong went wrong. And I know one thing that it's really important is that you have to pivot. You have to be able to switch on a dime, because it is primarily my substrate is wood, and wood is an organic beast. And you can set the table for it to react a certain way, but it doesn't always follow through. And so you have to be able to adapt to what it's offered. And I do that. And people tell you, when I tell people the kind of stuff that we did when I was a painting contractor, they look at me like I'm from another planet. We would actually go into a project, and you look at wood. Wood is, if you understand what wood is, heartwood and sapwood. In a conventional piece, that's the darker inner layers, the heartwood, and the outer layers, the sapwood, are white. My clients want a color, so that variation between heartwood and sapwood was not acceptable. And I would pre-treat the sapwood first. We'd go in with an artist brush, color it in, and then put our reaction on top so it was gone. Because most of our work was in historically accurate finishes. If we had a project that had a 100-year-old look inside that house or in that building, we had to make the new match. And they were right next to each other.
Would that be because so long ago the trees were bigger and the pieces of wood were cut out of the heart?
Right. So sap wasn't as viable then. And what they do now, people have no idea. The big thing that today, what they do is called steaming. When I say, is that steamed, people look at me like, what is steamed? If you understood what lumber companies are doing, because you're not cutting down old growth trees anymore. Most of those are gone.
Right.
You're cutting down second and third generation growth. So sapwood is a bigger piece of that tree. A very common species that's steamed is walnut. Most people have never seen what real walnut looks like, because what's at a lumber yard is steamed. And what is happening in a steaming process is they take that 12-inch wide board. Well, 4 inches it might be sapwood now. Whereas when it was first cut generation, it might have been a 1/4 inch sapwood. And they would cut off that 1/4 inch to have that heartwood. But you can't do that now, because your yield out of a log would be so less that they'd have to raise the price. So steaming is actually a process that goes through this chemical bath before it goes into the kiln. And it's steamed. And what happens in this process is the color of the heartwood is pulled out and goes into the sapwood. So in walnut, a traditional walnut is more like dark browns and purples and reds. Those are colors that are actually in the wood. Now they're brown, but it's kind of gray. And the sapwood is now colored to be more closer to the heartwood. So now the yield is 100% instead of 80% or 60%. And it happens in a variety of species. It happens in cherry, it happens in walnut. And so people don't really even realize the wood they're getting because they don't ask questions. They don't know what to look for. And so, again, I think if more people questioned, why does it look this way? Or tell me about X. Give me your experience here. The veil would be lifted off. I realize I have a different kind of knowledge than a lot of people that play in my field. But, I got it because I looked for it, because I cared, because I want to know, and because I know what's possible. And that's all I want people to know, is that they have options. I no longer say my way is the way, because people have choices. I just want you to know that you can have this and that, and have all the array of information in what is in my coding choices and what is in their coding choices. And you as a person choose for you what interests you, what look inspires you, instead of saying, I saw this in a magazine and everybody says this is beautiful, so therefore it must be beautiful. And that's the world we live in. Just because when you look at art, it's like, I love a Van Gogh, but, that inspires me. But a de Kooning or something that's more avant-garde, when people tell you that's beautiful and you're like, it doesn't seem beautiful to me, but everybody says it's beautiful, so it must be beautiful. That's the design world we live in. I just want to give people education about what choices exist and let them choose for themselves, not me telling you.
So if somebody was out there and they wanted to adopt and test some of these procedures and ideas, how would they learn about them? How would they decide? That's a bad choice of words. Where would they go to find this information?
Well, that's the problem right now. It doesn't really exist. It exists with me and people that I've trained, which haven't been a ton, and word of mouth. And that's, part of what I've done this year is hired a PR firm to help me get my message out, because I just want people to understand there are options. That's all. I love being able to blow people's minds with what is possible. I really do.
Well, we know that the craftsmanship of people, I would say, is in some ways exploding, because people are seeing what other people are doing, right, and people are creating and designing and building, and they're getting into the make this and make that. And if you're able to provide an alternative that is high quality, that's got all the things that you've listed, people will be, once they know, just like you've talked about, nobody knows. But once you start expressing this, and it could actually go, it can actually spread very quickly. And if this information is out there, just something. And I'm just thinking about my son, who has really gotten into woodworking over the last year. He's increased the complexity of the things that he's doing, and he's talked about the staining that he's doing, and he's doing all the conventional methods. He's not using anything like you've talked about.
Right.
And so if he was to go to learn this, there's no real source out there except for him to duplicate the path that you did, which is to get into the old text and learn and read. And if you were to start putting this information out on your website, I understand it's a lot of work, but the more you put out there, the more it'll get indexed, the more people will discover it. You could create a forum where people could talk about these things. Just the whole documentation project of just putting these concepts and ideas out there. It could even be a book that you build a little bit at a time that people could constantly get the latest edition of.
These are all things that I'm working on with this team, because, through social media, you're getting a lot of the makers. That's the makers are now, that people care about that now, that craft. There's a lot to be said about taking from nothing and making something, because there's
absolutely
passion involved. There's emotion involved. It's just, but what I tell my clients, and, as I travel around the country, I look for small makers, like furniture builders. I seek them out. I'm like, I believe in you. I've been in my craft for 30 years. I'm kind of near the end of my career. But what's important to me is to find these people that build at the craft level that I play at, and develop them and say, okay, you can take this fantastic build. So I see the expertise and the care and the level that you play at. But then when you put a coating on it the way you understand it, you're not adding value. You can build a fantastic piece and put even a high-end finish in that world on, and you're still a commodity because there's tons of people out there that do that. But when you take even an average piece and put the kind of finish on that I can teach you to do, you've elevated your game exponentially. People will see it. But imagine someone at the high level craft that puts that high level type finish on. The difference is astounding. People have to touch it. That is the greatest honoring for me. When people go into places that I've created finishes and they have to touch it because they don't believe it's even real. I mean, how can you see the wood like this and there's a coating on it? It's a foreign concept. Again, just like the finish of black. I just did a project in Aspen last summer, where I was teaching some furniture builders and painting contractors for a project in Aspen. It was just outside Aspen. How to take my process on wood, and it was everything that I taught. All the materials were 100% organic, which is a big deal in that part of the world. And one of the species was walnut, and they wanted black. And I made black, and you saw right through it. And it was 100% organic, and it was absolutely stunning. I mean, the depth and clarity and all the colors. When you play with reactive color, let me just back this up. So when you play with stain, you stain a piece of wood. Across a board, there's a bunch of subtle little colors. But when you stain it, you get one color and maybe different shades of those different colors that were there. But when you play with reactive color and organic color, because it is natural and organic, all those colors still exist. Even though it's black, you can see these subtle undertones of a red or a purple in the wood. It's almost a religious experience to see it, because it doesn't make any sense that this could actually exist, but it does.
Do you have any pictures that would show this?
On my Instagram page, which is at bespoke finish, one word, there's no hyphen like on my LinkedIn page. There's a bunch of those. Tons of stuff.
Okay. I'll link to that, of course, and if you have any that you could point out to me that I could actually put on the show notes page and say, this is an example of this is an example of this, because I'm not going to know for sure.
Sure.
And I'd really like to let people see examples of these specific things that you're talking about.
Okay. I've got a few examples that I would definitely show you. I can show you some samples of the black. And I can show you examples of taking brand new wood and matching it to 100-year-old plus wood finishes, and I guarantee you can't tell. There's no way you can tell, because I tell you, I can't tell sometimes, and I know where the starting and stopping point is.
Right. That'd be great.
And my level of knowledge and detail of what I see, I don't miss anything. I can tell you that. When I walk in, I see it all. And because I've trained myself to see it all. And it's when I can't find it again, I know it's perfect. I'll definitely send that link along to you.
That'd be great. Well, I wish that there was a good source of this information that would be available to people. I understand that you're training people, but we've got people all over the United States and, well, presumably the world, but that would probably find this of interest, and it's going to be very hard for them to duplicate any of this. There's just not a lot of data.
I know, and that's something I'm trying to figure out a path. I mean, there's only one of me right now, and it's hence why I want to do, when I get set up further, that I can bring apprentices on, a couple of them at a time. and kind of learn my approach, because I really think my approach is as important as the materials that I use. Because I said, even though I walk in and use the same exact materials that you do, the order in which I apply them and the way that I apply them has a profoundly different outcome. And I'll show you one linked on my Instagram page where I did just that. The guy had a piece of crotch mahogany. He put stain and a conventional process on, and I did my approach using his same materials. I didn't even do it. I just told him what to do. And his outcome, his client couldn't even believe it. It was the same color too. Just had complete clarity with stain, mind you. And I said, if I had the chance, the time to show you how to get that color through a reactive color, the depth would have been overwhelming to the guy. But as it was, he had approved a color. I walked in his shop. I looked at it. I said, do X. He made a quick sample, and then the next day did the final sample. And to tell you how bizarre it was, one of the FedEx guys had come in and seen this piece. It was just a pedestal for this client, and was so moved by it. This is a guy off the street delivering something to this business. He said, "What did you do here? It looks alive." That's the difference. Someone that knows nothing about it was so moved by the depth that was possible that he said something to that business owner. Wow, that is amazing. So it's approach and materials.
Well, it'll definitely be good to see some of those pictures.
Those are photographs on a phone too. That's usually what I'm taking them with. But when you see the depth that you can see from a phone, camera phone,
doesn't compare to the real thing.
It doesn't. But look at my page. You'll be shocked at what's in there. And I really appreciate the allowing me to talk here, because I really want people to know options that they have. So thank you so much for letting me be on your show.
Oh, you are absolutely welcome. I'm really disappointed that there's not more actual applicable material for people to get a hold of, but at least they're going to know. Perhaps that can help galvanize the undertaking of a documentation project.
Right. Well, there's some big stuff going to happen in 2019. I can tell you that. I mean, there's some really great projects I've got lined up. And, the documentation process is something that I'm working on, trying to find ways. And, I want to do workshops. I want to teach people because it's important to me. It just is.
Do you do any kind of video?
I have not done that yet, but that's one of the things we're talking about.
Awesome. If you just simply videotape what you're teaching people locally, that can be put up on YouTube or wherever.
Right.
And then thousands and thousands of people can view that.
And that's one of the things of the black, teaching the black, how to do the black, because I was going to give that out on Instagram, and my girlfriend's like, "You're nuts. Don't do that." That's so valuable. And then I thought about it. It's like, I guess black, it's kind of like a precursor to what's possible. Black and transparent. It doesn't make any sense, but I'm going to videotape taking a piece of wood and doing the reactive color on there in black and letting people see, yeah, it's black, and see all those colors. Now they're enhanced and the depth is there, and I can put any coating on top I want and still have it. I'm not going to use polyurethane, mind you, but I mean any material, any type of medium at the level that I want. But, it's not coming from the corner paint store or the corner coating store. It's going to something I'll bring in. But they exist. I just know where they are. That's the difference.
Right. Well, before we do wrap this up, anything else that you're thinking that you want to get off your chest?
All I can say for people is, if there's coatings out there that people are saying are great, ask questions. Don't just believe and drink the Kool-Aid because it looks good. And that one big player, that Rubio Monocoat, it is a product. It has cool colors, but it is not in any way not toxic. And it really just irritates the heck out of me that people don't question it. This is a huge corporation that sells all around the world, and we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars of sales for a product that is not what it says it is. So question everything. Ask questions, learn on your own.
On that note, you were talking earlier about how, I guess, poisonous and deadly a lot of the earlier techniques were. Mm-hmm. Did this wind up killing a lot of people that didn't understand that they were deadly?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you think about back in the early 1900s when they were like stickly furniture to get that color on oak. It was fumed, a fumed finish. I mean, a fumed finish is a reactive color. But to get a fumed finish, you're taking industrial grade ammonia, not the ammonia at your grocery store, something that is 5 times as strong. And you're sticking it in a bowl in a completely closed environment. So they would actually build a tent, put furniture inside the tent, and put these bowls of ammonia inside, and the fumes that would gas off would change the color of the wood. They used to do that in houses too. They would put a tent over a house, and people would put these, vats of ammonia in a house all over. But somebody had to go in there and get it out. Think about that. You would untent it, I mean, it's not like you had gas masks back then. They didn't get that.
They just had to man up and do it.
Yes. And it's like, that's not good.
No, that's
not good. That's just one example. It's possible to get a fumed finish look without that. I can do it with water, but I had to figure it out. It's different. It's a learning thing, and that's what I want to do. I want to teach. I want to change. I really want to change. I want to alter a business model of how color gets. That's important to me, so that people understand you have options.
Right.
And then you can choose for yourself, not someone telling you this is what you have to do.
Well, you had talked about the fact that you were worried that this knowledge would be lost.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, even if it's how to make something black, even if it's how to make something translucent, wouldn't be just putting all of this information out there just as quickly as possible without any regard to whether it's a trade secret or not, just putting it out there so it's available.
I'm working on that. I mean, to tell you one thing, there's actually a group I belong to. It's an email group. It's a small email group. There's only 150 people in this group. It's been around for 20 years. And in this group, the knowledge that is in here is crazy. There's some seriously talented people, and they freely share knowledge. And it's actually the short term for it is group, GROOP, and it's professionalrefinisher.com. I think it's what it is. I'll send you the link.
Okay.
And you can join. Anybody can join. It's $70, and you get emails. It's just an email group. But every year we meet at some place in the country and openly share techniques and knowledge because, again, that it matters. Now, I knew this knowledge existed. Some of the things that I've learned through this group is just unbelievable what is actually possible to do.
Right. And the way the world is going is to have knowledge much more freely available.
Absolutely.
It used to be very much, keep this to yourself, keep this to yourself.
Right.
When I got started in the IT world, you didn't tell anybody anything. Right. That was a quick way to be unsuccessful.
Yeah.
And today it's shifted to be such a different direction. And somebody had pointed out that if your business model relies on secret knowledge, your business model is effed.
Yeah, you're destined to fail. And I know that the thing is, the difference is that I can show you all the materials I use and even show you how to do it. But that still doesn't give you the art.
That's right.
To be able to do it in the way that I'm doing it. Even when I'm showing you the path, it takes time to get there.
Skill and practice.
And that's why it's important. Yeah. Yeah, because things are going to go wrong. I guarantee it. And you have to learn what to do. Step back, reevaluate, go this direction instead of just freaking out and doing something dumb, which is how people do codings today.
Well, there's two things there. It may be a dumb way, but we don't know.
But I know. I mean, dumb is not a nice word, but I mean, you know what I mean? It's the way that it's taught. It's, you're taught this is the only path. And there's really not schools for it anymore. There are a few small companies, small workshops around the country that I can link people to if they want, that have knowledge of people that I value and trust, that teach the conventional methods, but in a different way, so that they can have outcomes, so that they can see how something goes together, and the right kind of mind can say, hey, I understand how this is put together, and I understand sort of the science behind it. You don't have to have a PhD, but just understand the basics of the science of codings. And it's amazing how much you can manipulate it, how easy it is to manipulate it, and have a profoundly different outcome.
Right. Well, a couple of other things. Let's just kind of bring this to a close.
Yeah.
So, on a more personal note, how do you relax? How do you unwind? What kind of hobbies do you have?
I actually like to hunt, and I don't get to do it very often. I travel so much, and I'm in a fairly new relationship with this woman who been life-changing for me. But I mean, we've been in almost 2 years, but we travel a lot and really like art and experiencing, just life. And so
awesome.
That's what I do when I'm not actively engaged
in work.
But, it's really not almost work for me. I mean, I'm really passionate about what I do. I mean, it's wonderful to teach someone this and watch the light bulb go off.
Absolutely.
I want to inspire people to do.
Yes. Well, we take it to look at it different ways. I mean, I'm recording this podcast and I'm working and I have to do editing, and there may be some people that would hate that.
Right.
But I'm like, oh my God, this is so freaking great.
I think that's a fantastic path. I mean, and as I travel, I seek out people just that, and I just show up and say, hey, I tell them this is what I do, and I like to help you. And it's like, I'm not looking for you to pay me. I'm not. I just want to share this because I value what you do.
Right.
I have clients that pay me over here. That's where I make my money. But I really want to help you. And they look at me like, why? It's like, because it matters.
Exactly. Yes, sir. So do you read?
I do read. I read a lot. I mean, there's one thing about, I went to college for a little while, but it really wasn't my path. And I absorb information in a variety of sources. I don't really read a lot of books. I used to, but I just don't have the time to do it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But it's something I really want to do more is read books that add value to me, that help my path. And, after I got hurt and went through a dark time, John. I mean, I really did. I was lost. I did not know what to do.
I can understand.
I went through, I got divorced. You really find people that you think are your friends aren't. And that was pain. It really was. And so I actually took time for me. I went to therapy for 18 months, which is a long time. But it was the best investment I ever made in my life. And the one thing that I made a decision to not live with regrets ever again. Ever.
Absolutely. Yes.
So I tell people what I think. And that's why I have the relationship that I have now, which has absolutely been, oh my God, I feel so blessed to have found her. It has changed my life to have someone that believes in me, has my back, and appreciates the way that I think. And I mean, you find that person in life who is for you, and you have those core things that are important. Don't settle.
I agree.
People pick, I need these 3 or 4 things, and then the rest I'll just, it's some of that there, and it's like, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Find those things, those core issues that you have to have. And the one thing that I've learned, and I tell people all the time when I travel, and they ask me these questions, and I'm honest about it. It's like my path, I went in a dark hole, and I almost didn't come out of it, but I got healthy. I made that commitment to myself to get healthy. And I want to share with you this. As a man, especially in the United States, we're taught to not be vulnerable, to not show your weakness. But it's not a weakness. It's not to be vulnerable. It's a strength. To show yourself or share your story with someone is a strength. Because if it was a weakness, why is it so hard to do it? And so I share that part of my life with people and say, you can have it, but you have to make the effort. You have to risk, and you have to be willing to be rejected. And you know that going in, but you have to do it anyway, because when you do it, regardless of the outcome, it's life-changing emotionally. And that's where my strength comes, because I take that risk every day. And now, because I've done it for so long, because I don't live with regrets, because I made that choice, I have no fear. I mean, it has literally changed my outcome in life, because I have no fear.
That is absolutely awesome. And I understand and agree with you completely.
And I wish more people had it, because this world would be a completely different place if people operated openly and without fear. But they don't. They operate with fear and always worrying about, well, how I'm going to be perceived. I don't give a shit what people think about me. I honestly don't. I don't care.
Excellent. That is great.
I like who I am. I don't need your approval to get out of bed. I used to be the opposite. I cared about it so much that it ruled my life. But I literally do not care what you think about me, because I don't need your approval.
Dude, you're preaching to the choir. I absolutely understand.
Right.
And I was there myself, and now I'm where I am.
Having this in the background is why I travel as much as I do, why I talk to people, because I can. Because I don't have the fear. I have the passion, and I have knowledge, and I want to get it out there. And I know the universe sets people up for positive things. You put positive out, positive comes back. Again, what are the chances of us meeting and reaching out together and creating this and the knowledge that was shared today and our stories that we're just sharing right now? That's a fluke thing, but it happened.
And it's not random chance. We both have set ourselves up to be open to these types of opportunities.
Absolutely. That's right. And again, people don't realize that. You have to, opportunities don't happen. You have to make them happen. Most people sit back and wait for shit to happen in their life, because that's kind of the stuff you're taught. It's like, wrong. That's why I want people to change the perception of what's possible in the world that I play in, because it is. What you know is a small microcosm of what is actually out there. Very small.
Robert, I'm really glad that we had this show. I'm really glad that we've talked.
Me too. And, I hope you're super successful, because you are gifted at what you do.
Well, I appreciate that.
And I will send you some links and some examples. And, I look forward to more. I really do.
That sounds great. Who knows where this is all going to go eventually. So what's the best place? I know you mentioned it earlier, but what's the best place if people want to contact you? How would you prefer that?
They can go into my LinkedIn page and DM me. That's actually the best.
Do you have a contact form on your website?
I do.
Okay. Well, what's your website address?
It's www.bespoke, BESPOKE -finish, FINISH.com. And then my Instagram page is @bespoke finish, but it doesn't have a hyphen. It's just one word.
Excellent. And the reason I mentioned that is not everybody's on LinkedIn.
Right.
Well, I will include links to those things in the show notes. And then, of course, you'll be emailing me some additional information and also pictures. Robert, thank you so much for being on the show today. And I'm looking forward to getting this out to everybody. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks a lot, John. I take care now.
This episode's trivia question is, what material were the original 78 RPM records made out of? Hey y'all, before you go, two things I want to discuss. The first is, I am looking for more great guests for the Blue Collar Voices show. Basically, I am looking for those that excel in the blue collar arena and needs to be those that have actually got their hands dirty and actually played in the dirt, so to speak. I don't care if you're a multi-million-dollar home builder CEO now, as long as at one point you were actually swinging a hammer, sheetrocking, etc. Or suppose you worked on a fishing boat and you worked your way up to captain, as an example. I don't care where you are now, as long as you have excelled and made a difference. Now the second thing, and exciting, hey, at least for me, I am planning a road trip. Phase 1 is to find great places to visit all over the USA and even a few places up in Canada. It might be I just drive by, shake your hand, and take a picture. Or perhaps we do an in-person podcast. And maybe even video showing off what you do. If the situation warrants, perhaps a ride-along, if that's the type of business you do. If you're interested in either, or you can make a recommendation, email me at johnc@bluecollarvoices.com. You can also hit me up on LinkedIn. Thanks all. Looking forward to growing the Blue Collar Voices show. Blue Collar Voices is produced by John Chapman, and all audio, video, graphics are created and edited by John Chapman. Blue Collar Voices is a DR7 Media production.
I'll be back.